So I am very passionate about clinical ladders. We do not have one in the market that I currently was working in, and I had been very diligently trying to get one going for about 8 years and really just kept hitting wall after wall after wall. And so when I came into this new position, I saw an opportunity to really try to create something that we could standardize across our entire healthcare system, because we have such variation in clinical ladders. We have no clinical ladder. We have a very robust clinical ladder with a lot of different levels. We have a clinical ladder that's built around, just having those big portfolios and those big binders and point-based systems. And so I was really excited when I was brought into the project to be able to try to create something that we could put across the entire organization that would be simpler for nurses and more meaningful to nurses, but also meaningful for the organization. Do some research. Find out what's out there, find out what programs other organizations have that work. I really went to nursing theory and what exists within our nursing theory and how can we put that into our current structures, and then taking a look at what's important to our organization, and then stakeholders. Stakeholders are so important in a big project like this. You have to have the right stakeholders, because if you don't, you'll never get your ideas advanced. Good time management and being very organized. I'm a previous magnet program director, so organization is really key. But I think it's really just kind of having that really strong team and knowing when you need to come together and go full force, and when you need to you can say, okay, we can operate in a little bit less of a frequency, and a lot of email and video communication. For me, it was This Is the One. I saw it and I instantly fell in love with it. I loved the concept that it's all cloud-based, that the nurses could access it from the desktops at work or their phones or their iPads, and that's something we've ever had before. They've always been kind of built into being able to utilize only the ones that are set within the organization, and that was really frustrating. So just that usability and just the uniqueness of the platform itself was just absolutely fantastic, and that we could customize it. It does come down to cost. One of the big things, you have to prove that return on investment. You have to prove that, by investing in this particular company, this vendor, this platform, you're going to be able to get that back in a certain time frame. And then also knowing what are the limitations within your current systems. And so that, again, that's engaging the right key stakeholders to be able to say, what can we do, what can't we do, and then really doing that, cost-benefit analysis with a comparison between the two. For me, it is putting the nurse first and creating something that, again, is going to be meaningful for the nurse. Because if you make it meaningful for the nurse, then it becomes meaningful to the organization, and then that's really when you get those positive patient outcomes. All nurses want to do great things, right? But it's our responsibilities as leaders to take some of those barriers and roadblocks out of their way so that they can do something that's great, that is going to make them feel good at the end of the day, that is going to create positive patient outcomes. And I feel a clinical ladder provides them with that empowerment to be able to do those things and to really kind of take their own professional practice that next step. And I really strongly believe in things like career pathways. And I feel like but we want to keep clinical nurses at the bedside. So if we give clinical nurses a career path at the bedside where they can grow and expand and professionally develop, and that's really the benefit for me of the clinical ladder, because then that's going to get to those ultimate positive patient outcomes. So I think, in the places that do have a clinical ladder, it's shifting that mindset from this is what we had to this is where we're going to, and moving away again from that points-based mentality to what we've created, which is kind of a non-points-based mentality. That's a big cultural shift. And then in sites where we don't have a clinical ladder, then obviously the dollars do come into play, right? Because we've not budgeted for that. So how do we move forward with a budgeting process relative to that? But I think those are really the two big things, moving that cultural mindset of the old version of a clinical ladder to this newer kind of revolutionary version. And then, the finances behind it, which, for us, we've had some bumps and starts and bumps, and we're finally into a start mentality again, and, getting ready to roll out, our first iteration of this whole new clinical ladder, and, that's very exciting. So then, having success there, and building small and working out. Knowing we can't go big bang. That's just not feasible in an organization our size. So kind of initially thinking that's what we were going to do, scaling it back and saying, okay, well, let's start a market that doesn't have a ladder. It might be easier. Hitting a road bump, having to repivot. Now let's go to a market where we do have a ladder, and now changing that cultural mindset of what they had to moving to what we're getting to. My main focus was utilizing the StaffGarden platform to create something for our clinical nurses, for our end users, for our managers, for our clinical ladder review boards that would very seamlessly kind of move the whole process forward and make it very accessible with a lot less kind of burden, that administrative burden that clinical ladders so often bear. The big portfolio binders, and nurses have to collect all this, and then you have to give it to somebody, and then they sit on a shelf and nobody ever knows what's happened to them. And then you don't know what the projects are. And so there's no way to share that information or be able to have that data to be able to understand, is this program successful? Is this program not successful? And so having a platform where we can actually go in and do some data mining, for me, that was really exciting because I want to see what the outcomes of our efforts actually are. One of the things as a magnet program director that we always struggle with, what are some of those initiatives that are going on in the organization, and being able to identify them and utilize them when we're writing our magnet documents and proving those sources of evidence that we have to, and having the data to support those stories. And so with using a platform like StaffGarden, we're able to have a repository of those where we can go in and say, wow, look what this nurse has done, look at the data they were able to generate, and pull that story and really use it to prove that yes, we met those standards, we met that exemplary professional practice concept. So it really is just a fantastic way to be able to help a magnet program director and really, again, celebrate the achievements of the nurses in an organization. Utilization for one. We don't really know how many people are on the clinical ladder because that is a very manual process currently. So knowing what our utilization is on the clinical ladder, knowing what our retention is for nurses that are on the clinical ladder, looking at certifications, how many of our nurses do engage in achieving a specialty certification, being able to pull all that information out of there, as well as being able to look and say what evidence-based practice projects are going on that we're seeing positive results on, and how do we then take those results and put them in other sites to be able to drive good clinical outcomes for our patients. So I think when we set, for instance, our organization sets our key performance indicators, our KPIs, sometimes they're kind of that 100,000 foot level, and how meaningful are they, and what is the work that's currently going on in the organization. So having a platform where we can go in and we can say, clearly we're having maybe an issue on all of these units relative to bloodstream infections, and we have 12 different projects going on, but so far, we've seen 2 that are really successful, that are really common across all these sites. We can say this is what's really making an impact on this particular clinical outcome. Let's go ahead and implement this everywhere. And then we're able to positively affect those infection rates across our entire organization, which helps everybody in the long run. It helps us achieve our key performance indicators, and it helps our patients have better outcomes. So having some place where we can pull that information and align what our data outcomes are from our quality folks with what our nurses are working on the front lines, and merging the two of them, for me, is kind of a game changer.